virtually all of our aging nuclear reactors will come to the end of their lives in the next 10 years. So now we've got this unique opportunity to rebuild our power system from the ground up. And there's basically in Ontario two competing visions of how we should do that. There's really only two visions. The first vision is that we should repeat what we've done in the past. And basically stick with nuclear. That vision is that we should rebuild our aging nuclear power plants and remain dependent on high-cost nuclear for another 30 to 50 years. That's one vision of how we should move forward. Basically, just stay with the past. You know, nuclear was a vision from the 1950s. In the 1950s, the nuclear industry said it would be too cheap to meter. Lots of people believed them, and it was the great hope in the 1950s. And for some people, it still is. They're suggesting we should rebuild our aging nuclear reactors and just continue with the 1950s vision. And the other vision is that we should combine our made in Ontario green energy, like solar and biomass, wind, water power. We should combine it with energy conservation, and we should combine it with water power imports from Quebec. And with that combination, we can actually lower our bills and move to a 100% renewable grid by 2030. So those are the two competing visions. Remain committed to nuclear for another 30 to 50 years, or move to a 100% renewable grid and lower our bills. Those are the two competing visions. And I'm with the Ontario Clean Air Alliance, and we're supporters of the renewable energy vision of moving to a 100% renewable grid. And so I want to talk to you just first about energy conservation, because that's one of the ways that we think we can get to a renewable future and lower our bills. So energy conservation, in our view, is the best way to keep our lights on for all kinds of reasons. First, energy conservation is the cleanest option. Second, energy conservation is by far the lowest cost option to keep our lights on. It's much cheaper to save a kilowatt hour than to produce a new kilowatt hour by building another power station. Third, energy conservation will create jobs in every community in Ontario. It will create jobs in every home by home energy retrofits, in every building, in every factory. So energy conservation can create jobs across Ontario. And there's also another indirect way that energy conservation can create more jobs in Ontario. Because if we do more energy conservation, that means that less Ontario dollars will flow out of Ontario to Western Canada or to Pennsylvania to buy natural gas or uranium. We get virtually all of our natural gas for our natural gas-fired power plants, and we get all of our from Western Canada or Pennsylvania, and we get all the uranium for our nuclear reactors from Saskatchewan. So if we do energy conservation instead, again, less dollars will flow out to Western Canada or to Pennsylvania. More dollars will stay right here in Ontario, creating jobs. And then, sorry, was there a question? No. And then the last reason why energy conservation is so good and so important for moving to a renewable future is that energy conservation, by reducing the demand for grid supplied electricity, makes it easier for us to get 100% of our grid supplied electricity from renewable sources. Obviously, as lower as the total demand, the easier it is to meet all that demand by renewable options. So energy conservation, that's the best way to move to a renewable future. It's the lowest cost, it's the cleanest, creates jobs. And then the great option for us to move to a renewable future is to import clean water power from Quebec. Now, many people don't realize it, but Quebec is the fourth largest producer of water power in the world. The fourth largest producer of water power in the world, and we're just next door to it. And not only are they a huge producer of water power, but they have some of the lowest rates in North America. In Montreal, the residential rates are 45% lower than they are here in Toronto. And their industrial rates are 55% lower. So, and that's because of water power. And not only do they have these low rates, but they've got this huge surplus of water power. They've got more than they need. And not only do they have a huge surplus, but the surplus is growing. And what they're doing is they're exporting virtually all of the surplus electricity to the United States. And not only are they exporting to the United States, but they're exporting to the United States at a very low price. In 2012, the average price of their exports was only 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Only 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And so the Americans are smart enough to buy cheap, low-cost water power from Quebec. But what about us? No. In last year, our net water power imports from Quebec met just 1.4% of our electricity needs. Just 1.4%. And that doesn't make sense when water power from Quebec is our lowest cost option for new supply. And it also happens to be 100% renewable. So that's why we think it's a really fantastic option for Ontario.
So why is that? I mean, why is it that way? I mean, from your vantage point, like, why are we not buying that cheap electricity from Quebec? What's the impediment?
Okay, I was going to get that
Is that later?
in a couple of minutes,
Okay.
but I will get to it.
I'll wait. I can wait.
Is that sold in the spot market? It's not locked up under long-term contracts, is it?
Yeah, most of the exports to Quebec are short-term sales.
Okay.
It's about over 90% are short-term sales. So less than 10% is long-term contracts. They do have a long-term contract, for example, with the state of Vermont. In 2010, they signed a deal with Vermont, 26-year contract, a firm supply, and a starting price of 5.8 cents a kilowatt hour. 5.8 cents a kilowatt hour. That's what Vermont, got it for. And I say Ontario gets virtually no electricity, and like most of the Ontario grid gets virtually none. But there's an interesting story. Everyone knows where Cornwall is, I trust. Cornwall's on the St. Lawrence, a city in Ottawa. But for decades, they've been getting all their electricity from Quebec. They've had long-term contracts with Quebec for decades. So they're a little anomaly in the Ontario situation. But, okay, so that's what we're proposing. Energy conservation, low-cost water power from Quebec, and made in Ontario green energy. And we see the water power from Quebec as a transition option. We've got all these aging nuclear reactors are coming to the end of their lives. It could be difficult politically and economically to ramp up energy conservation and made in Ontario green energy quick enough to replace all of that nuclear power in the next 10 years. But we can get water power from Quebec as a transition option as we're ramping up the energy conservation and the renewable energy in Ontario. And as gradually over time, as we do more and more conservation, we do more and more made in Ontario green energy, we can back off from the amount of water power we get from Quebec.
Is the infrastructure that's required to bring the power from Quebec already there? Or is that
Yeah, we already have transmission interconnections with Quebec, enough to give us like 17% of our total electricity needs. Power generation, which owns Darlington, they're very pro the nuclear option. And according to their estimates, they claim that it would cost 8.6 cents a kilowatt hour to rebuild Darlington. 8.6 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, so there's two things to note about that price. That's what OPG says the cost of rebuilding Darlington would be, 8.6 cents a kilowatt hour. Two important things to note. 8.6 cents a kilowatt hour is more than double the cost of water power imports from Quebec. Remember, they're selling it to the States for 4 cents. So 8.6 cents, it's more than double the cost of water power from Quebec. So why would we rebuild Darlington at 8.6 cents if we can import water power from Quebec for 4 cents? It makes no economic sense. And in fact, if we cancel the Darlington rebuild and imported water power from Quebec, which is so much cheaper, we would reduce our electricity bills by up to $1 billion a year or more. Up to $1 billion a year or more. And all the political leaders say they want to help us reduce our electricity bills. So you would think they would be supporting that. So that it doesn't, in our view, it just doesn't make sense to rebuild the nuclear reactors. And then the second thing is, okay, so OPG says it's 8.6 cents a kilowatt hour. And that's way too expensive. It's twice the cost of water power imports from Quebec. But it's even worse than that, because this is what the nuclear industry always does. They always lowball their cost estimates to get political approval for their projects. But they never keep their promise. Every single nuclear project in Ontario's history has gone massively over budget, on average by 2.5 times. So we know that if we do proceed with the Darlington rebuild, it will actually cost way more than 8.6 cents a kilowatt hour. So that in turn means that by cancelling the Darlington rebuild, doing the water power from Quebec, we actually will save much more than $1 billion a year. So again, we think, it's just proceeding with nuclear, reinvesting in nuclear is economically irrational. So the question is, well, why is Premier Wynne promoting it? Why is Tim Hudak promoting it? If what I'm saying is right, like Premier Wynne, Tim Hudak, these are intelligent people. Why are they proceeding with that? Well,
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Does that figure include insurance costs and disposal costs?
Well, not insurance, because there's a cap on their liability of about $75 million. And so if there is an accident and the costs are more than $75 million, it's all paid by you or me. And in terms of, you also asked about the decommissioning, did you, and the long-term storage of waste? Well, they'll say it does. But when you look at what they say the cost is for decommissioning and the long-term storage of radioactive waste, their cost estimate is so low that it's not credible. So I would say, in effect, it doesn't really. Okay, so why, Premier Wynne, Tim Hudak, smart people, why do they support it? Well, I think the answer is very simple. There's a very, very powerful nuclear special interest lobby in Ontario. Very powerful. And it's very dangerous for any politician to buck it. And, who is this powerful nuclear special interest lobby? Well, first of all, it's Ontario Power Generation and Bruce Power, which own or operate our nuclear power plants. Bruce Power is just a nuclear company. OPG is also a water power company. It was a coal company. It does have some gas plants. Combine those two companies, they're the two biggest power companies in Ontario. Combined, they produce more than 80% of oil. So they're very powerful companies, and they're very, very pro-nuclear. So that's an important part of the nuclear lobby. They've also got, all their workers are members of the Power Workers Union, which is, again, is a very powerful lobby. And if you are one of the people who still read daily papers, you'll often see their full-page ads about how great nuclear is. And if you listen to baseball games on the radio, I think you'll also often hear their ads about how wonderful nuclear is. So they're a very powerful lobby, the Power Workers Union. And then, there's Bruce Power, which is, operates the Bruce nuclear stations. And it's owned by OMERS, the pension fund, and it's also owned by TransCanada Corp that wants to build the Keystone Pipeline. So again, those are also, powerful institutions that are members of the pro-nuclear lobby. And also, to rebuild these nuclear reactors, there'll be big, very expensive projects, and there's construction companies like SNC Lavalin and Aecon Construction, who are obviously would benefit from rebuilding of the nuclear reactors, and so they're part of the nuclear lobby. So there's all these companies that have a very strong vested interest in pursuing a nuclear, and they're part of the nuclear lobby, and so it makes it, could be very dangerous for a politician to oppose them and come out against nuclear power. Yeah.
What's happened to that Niagara Falls project that they were doing the electricity? Yeah.
The Big Becky? Yeah, it's finally being completed. And
Are we
it's
supposed to get some electricity from that?
Oh, we do.
Oh, we do?
We get about 25% of our power from water power in Ontario.
Okay.
Yeah, and so Big Becky, Niagara Falls we've had it for over 100 years. It was developed at the beginning of the last century, and it's a fantastic, low-cost, clean source of power. And the Big Becky, the extra tunnel, meant that more water could be taken and put through existing turbines, and so it produces more electricity. So yeah, that was a great project, and we're a strong supporter of it.
So that's all we can get from it, that we were at capacity for that?
Well, we're virtually at capacity. We could do another tunnel and get more, but that would be a very expensive project. Much more expensive than energy conservation, much more expensive than water power from Quebec.
But less expensive than nuclear.
Probably, yes. So so that's what we're up against. That's a powerful lobby. But nevertheless, we're optimistic that we can win. And our reasons for optimism is that we're now in the midst of a provincial election. And this is a very competitive provincial election. I mean, you know, there's three major political parties. I think conceivably any of those parties could win this election. So it's very competitive. And that gives us more options because they're all looking for our votes. They're all desperate for our votes. And also we all know that, you know, rising electricity rates and bills are a big political issue right now. And the water power is just a no-brainer solution that can save us $1 billion a year or more. So this is a very attractive political option. And so what we are going to try to do is persuade one or more of our political leaders to become a champion for water power imports from Quebec, to give voters what they really want, which is lower electricity bills. And if we can just get one leader to break away and really become the champion of it, that'll all of a sudden mean this issue gets a lot of media play. And people will think about it, because everybody we talk to, virtually everyone says, this is just a no-brainer, of course we should be doing this. But, you know, I'm not on the nightly news. But if we get one of the three major political leaders to be on the nightly news championing this, that would really get the message out to the population, the voters, and they would say, yeah, this is a great idea, and they would be more inclined to vote for that champion. And as a result, because it's such a no-brainer, if one of them advocates for it, I'm sure the other ones will quickly advocate for it too. And and then we're going to have a very positive dynamic. And I'd just like to remind you about, you know, our original mission was to phase out coal. That's when we started in 1997, to phase out coal. And, you know, back in 2002, in the summer of 2002, we had lots and lots of smog alerts, lots of bad smog days. Air pollution, dirty coal was a big issue. September the 9th, Dalton McGuinty, the leader of the opposition, promised to phase out coal by 2007. He said that on September the 9th. September the 10th, the next day, Howard Hampton, the leader of the NDP, also committed to a coal phase out by 2007 if he was elected. And then 1 week later, after Dalton McGuinty had made that pledge, Ernie Eves, the Premier of Ontario, committed the government of Ontario to a complete coal phase out by 2050. So that's the type of dynamic of how, you know, when people come up to an election, when it's a competitive election, great things can happen in a democracy. So that's what we're hoping will happen in this election too. Everyone wants to win. Electricity prices are a big issue. We've got the solution, a simple, no-brainer solution. So what we're doing to try to move this forward in the election is we're sending a questionnaire to leaders of all the political parties, asking them if they would be willing to seek to negotiate a long-term electricity contract with Hydro-Quebec to give us, you know, water power to reduce our bills by up to $1 billion a year. So that's a questionnaire we're sending to all the candidates. For those of you who signed up for our email bulletin, you'll know the results as soon as we get them. And also, what we're doing is we're producing a new water power pamphlet, sort of like the pamphlet that I gave you tonight. But the pamphlet I gave you tonight's got a postcard of Premier Win. So that's going, and it's just going to be a simpler, get the message across. We're printing 100,000 of them. We'll have them next week. And we're going to distribute them with our supporters across Ontario to build public awareness about this great option, again, to put the pressure on the politicians to do the right thing. So that's our strategy, and with your help, we can win this battle, and we can stop the Darlington rebuild, and we can move this great province to a 100% renewable electricity grid. So thank you for your attention, and if you've got questions, I'll be pleased.